From the beginning of time, the narrative of Lucifer has been etched into the collective imagination as the story of a mighty angel who fell from grace, consumed by pride and ambition. Western tradition, heavily influenced by medieval theology and later interpretations, paints Lucifer as a brilliant archangel who rebelled against God, was cast out of heaven, and became Satan himself. But what if this story is not as ancient as we think? What if the earliest scriptures, particularly those preserved in Ethiopia, reveal a startlingly different picture, one where Lucifer was never an angel at all? This revelation not only challenges centuries of doctrine, but also reshapes the way we view the forces of evil, rebellion, and the nature of God's creation itself. Deep within the highlands of Ethiopia, hidden for centuries in the vaults of monasteries carved into mountains and guarded by priests who trace their lineage back to ancient Israel, lies a collection of sacred texts that never made their way into the Western canon. These books, written in Gs, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia, are revered as holy within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but were labeled apocryphal or outright heretical in the West. Among them are texts like the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and the Kebra Nagast, writings that weave together cosmology, history, and theology in ways that challenge mainstream Christianity. And within these writings, Lucifer's story looks nothing like the polished tale we've been taught. The Ethiopian scriptures do not begin by calling Lucifer a magnificent angel of light, nor do they speak of him holding rank beside Michael or Gabriel. Instead, they often associate the adversary with a primordial force of chaos, an entity not born from God, as heavenly hierarchy, but one that emerges as a deceiver, a corrupter, and a distortion of divine order. In these texts, the being we later identify as Satan is less a fallen angel, and more an embodiment of rebellion against creation itself, a shadow that rises when free will is misused. This reframing strips away the romanticized tragedy of a proud angel's fall, and instead paints the adversary as something far more unsettling. Not a heavenly being corrupted, but a parasite that never belonged among the angels to begin with. One of the most striking details found in the Ethiopian tradition is how evil is often tied not to a singular angelic rebellion, but to the corruption brought into the world by other beings, the Watchers, a group of angels mentioned in the Book of Enoch. These Watchers descended to earth, lusted after human women, and gave birth to the Nephilim, giants who brought violence and destruction. The texts make it clear that these angels were the ones who fell, bound in darkness for their transgressions, but Lucifer, as we imagine him, is conspicuously absent from their ranks. Instead, the adversary is described as the chief tempter, the one who deceived Eve, the one who manipulates, but never as an angel cast down from glory. This subtle but profound distinction suggests that Western theology may have merged two separate traditions, one about rebellious angels, and another about the deceiver of humankind, into a single narrative. The question then arises: how did Lucifer become known as a fallen angel in the first place? When we trace the word Lucifer, we find that it originates not from ancient Hebrew, but from a Latin translation of Isaiah 14. In the Vulgate Bible, the Hebrew term Elel ben Shashar, meaning shining one, son of the dawn, was translated as Lucifer, or light springer. But in context, Isaiah 14 was not describing an angel at all. It was a taunt directed at the king of Babylon, mocking his pride and downfall. Only centuries later did interpreters, influenced by Greco-Roman imagery of light and darkness, attach this passage to the cosmic struggle of Satan. Ethiopian texts, by contrast, never confuse the king of Babylon with a heavenly being. Instead, they keep the deceiver's identity consistent as a corrupter and accuser, but never a radiant angel who lost his place in heaven. This divergence raises a haunting possibility that the image of Lucifer as a fallen angel was a Western invention, a theological myth built over centuries, while the older Eastern traditions like Ethiopia preserved a memory closer to the original truth. If this is the case, then Christianity's great villain is not a tragic figure punished for ambition, but a darker, more insidious force that has existed outside of heaven from the beginning. It suggests that evil was never birthed in heaven, but instead lurked in the shadows of creation, waiting for an opportunity to twist God's order. The Ethiopian perspective also transforms the way we interpret the story of Eden. In Western Christianity, Satan, as Lucifer, is imagined to have disguised himself as a serpent, luring Eve into disobedience. But in Ethiopian writings, the deceiver is seen less as a disguised angel and more as a primal force, the whisper of chaos that entered creation to lead humanity astray. This interpretation removes the sense of a fallen angel, stooping down to corrupt, and instead highlights the idea of an eternal adversary, one whose presence is necessary for testing the free will of humans. It shifts the story from a tale of betrayal in heaven to a cosmic struggle that begins on earth itself. The implications are massive. If Lucifer was never an angel, then the grand narrative of heaven's rebellion collapses. Michael's victory over the dragon in Revelation may not describe an angelic civil war, but rather the eternal triumph of order over chaos. The Satan of Job is not a disgraced angel, but a tester, one allowed to challenge human faithfulness. And the so-called fall of Lucifer becomes a misinterpretation of Scripture, amplified by centuries of Western theology, but absent from the oldest traditions that still preserve fragments of the early faith. For the Ethiopian Church, this difference is not merely academic. Their liturgy, their hymns, and their worldview see the adversary not as a fallen brother of the angels, but as the eternal enemy of truth. This changes the nature of spiritual warfare. In the West, the fallen angel narrative creates a kind of tragic fascination with Lucifer, a being who once stood close to God, and then lost it all. But in Ethiopia, there is no room for such sympathy. The deceiver was never divine, never glorious, and never worthy of reverence. He was always the corrupter, the liar, and the destroyer. This perspective strips away the glamour and focuses solely on the threat. It also forces us to ask why the Western Church clung so tightly to the fallen angel narrative. Was it to make evil more understandable? To give it a human-like backstory that we could comprehend? Was it to craft a dramatic cosmic tale of rebellion that paralleled our own struggles with pride and disobedience? Or was it simply the result of centuries of translation errors and theological speculation that merged separate traditions into one story? Whatever the reason, the Ethiopian scriptures stand as a witness that there was another way of understanding evil. One less romantic, but perhaps more terrifying. As modern scholars gain more access to Ethiopia's ancient libraries, we are rediscovering how much of early biblical tradition has been lost or deliberately excluded from the Western canon. The story of Lucifer is just one example. In the West, we see him as the tragic angel of light who became the prince of darkness. In Ethiopia, he is no such thing. He was never an angel, never a bearer of light, but always the shadow that tried to consume creation. This forgotten truth not only challenges our theology, but forces us to confront a deeper question. If evil was never born from heaven, then where did it come from? And what does that mean for humanity's place in the cosmic struggle? The forbidden scriptures of Ethiopia invite us to reconsider the story we think we know. They strip away centuries of myth and reveal a starker reality, that evil is not the fall of something once good, but the persistent shadow that has always stood against God's creation. And in that revelation lies both a warning and a challenge. To recognize that the battle is not against a fallen angel seeking redemption, but against an eternal enemy that was never part of heaven at all.